The $32 trillion heist that has just been executed against the American people is not a robbery in the traditional sense because in a robbery, you know you have been robbed. But in this operation, you are being thanked for your contribution while they strip the copper wiring out of your financial future. That $32 trillion figure represents the aggregate value of the retirement accounts, pension funds, and 401k assets that have been quietly designated as the collateral for a sovereign debt crisis that the government knows it cannot solve. This is not a prediction of what might happen. This is a forensic accounting of what has already happened through a mechanism called financial repression, where the purchasing power of your life's work is being siphoned off to keep a bankrupt system on life support for just a few more years. You check your account balance and see numbers, and you think you are safe. But those numbers are an illusion because the currency those numbers are denominated in has been weaponized against you. They have not just raided the vault, they have raided the very definition of value, leaving you holding a bag of paper that is mathematically guaranteed to purchase half of what it did a decade ago. The reason this feels invisible is that the theft is designed to look like market volatility or transitory economic conditions. But make no mistake, this is a coordinated liquidation of the middle class. When we talk about 32 trillion, we are talking about the liquidity that the Federal Reserve and the Treasury need to service the national debt. And the only pool of capital large enough to cover that bill is your retirement. By forcing pension funds and 401k managers to hold government bonds that yield less than the rate of inflation, they are effectively taxing you without passing a law. Every year that inflation runs at 5% and your safe bond portfolio yields 4%, you are paying a 1% wealth tax directly to the state. But the real numbers are far worse. Real inflation is double what they report, meaning the wealth transfer is happening at a pace that will leave millions of Americans reaching retirement age only to find that their nest egg is essentially an empty shell. You are the yield. You are the bailout. The context for this raid is critical because we are living through the end of the greatest debt supercycle in recorded history. Since 1980, the entire financial model of the West has been built on the premise of falling interest rates and cheap credit. That cycle is dead. It died the moment inflation roared back, forcing central banks to choose between destroying the economy with high rates or destroying the currency with inflation. They have chosen a third path, which is the trap. They are keeping rates high enough to break the consumer, but printing enough money to save the banks. This creates a stagflationary environment where the stock market, where your 401k lives, becomes a volatility trap. Retail investors are being told to buy the dip and stay the course by financial advisors who are reading from a playbook written 30 years ago. Meanwhile, institutional capital is fleeing the very assets you are being told to buy. Consider the asymmetry of information here. The CEO of the company in your 401k is selling stock. The politicians regulating the market are trading based on classified briefings. The central bankers setting the rates are owning nothing but inflation-hedged assets. And you are the dumb money in their equation. You are the passive investor who automatically dumps a portion of your paycheck into a blind trust every 2 weeks, regardless of price, regardless of value, regardless of risk. You are the perfect victim because you are predictable. They know exactly when you buy, every payday. They know you won't sell because you have been terrified by tax penalties. You are trapped in a burning theater where the exits are blocked by tax codes and withdrawal limits, and they are turning up the heat. The market isn't a free exchange of value anymore. It is a harvesting machine designed to separate you from your labor. The trap is further baited by the illusion of nominal gains. You might see your portfolio go up by 7% and think you are winning. But if the cost of energy, food, housing, and insurance has risen by 12%, you are losing. You are bleeding out, but because the number on the screen is green, you don't call the doctor. This is the genius of the fiat money system. It allows the state to default on its obligations to you slowly, incrementally, and invisibly. If the government simply seized 30% of your bank account overnight, there would be riots in the streets. But if they devalue the currency by 30% over 3 years while pumping the nominal price of stocks, people feel richer while becoming poorer. This cognitive dissonance is the psychological cage that keeps the American worker compliant while their future is dismantled. To understand the mechanism of this heist, you have to look at the plumbing of the bond market and the exit liquidity strategy of the major players. The mechanism relies on the relationship between bond yields and prices. When interest rates rise, the value of existing bonds crashes. Your 401k, particularly if you are in a target date fund, is loaded with these toxic bonds. As the Federal Reserve hiked rates at the fastest pace in history, they blew a hole in the balance sheets of these funds. But instead of letting the market clear, they created backstop facilities to hide the losses. The $32 trillion figure relates to the massive wall of refinancing that is coming due for the U.S. government and corporate America. Who is going to buy that debt? Who is going to lend money to a government that is $34 trillion in the hole? You are, through your pension, through your 401k. This is a forced conscription of your capital. Regulatory changes are quietly being pushed through that incentivize or even mandate retirement funds to hold more government debt. They call it prudence or safety, but it is actually forcing you to buy the debt that the rest of the world is dumping. China is selling U.S. treasuries. Japan is selling U.S. treasuries. The Saudis are moving away from the petrodollar. The smart money is out. So the government needs a new buyer of last resort. That buyer is the American retirement system. They are using your savings to plug the hole in the dam. When you buy a total bond market index fund, you are essentially buying the toxic waste of the sovereign debt crisis. You are stepping in front of a freight train to save the conductors. Historical context is vital here. In 1929, the market crash wiped out the speculators. In 2008, the crash wiped out the homeowners. In this coming crisis, the target is the retiree. We are seeing parallels to the post-WW era where governments used financial repression to pay off war debts. They capped interest rates and forced institutions to hold government paper. It worked for the government, but it decimated the savers. The difference today is the demographics. In the 1940s, we had a young, growing population. Today, the baby boomers are retiring en masse, needing to withdraw that liquidity exactly when the liquidity is drying up. It is a demographic time bomb strapped to a financial nuclear weapon. The domino effect begins when the first major pension fund declares it has to cut benefits because its safe assets have lost 40% of their value. Once that confidence breaks, the run on the funds begins, and that is when they will gate the system. They will simply tell you that you cannot withdraw your money for the good of the system. The mechanism also involves the reclassification of risk. Banks and funds are allowed to mark assets at hold-to-maturity prices, meaning they can pretend a bond is worth 100 cents on the dollar, even if it is trading at 60 cents on the open market. This accounting fraud keeps the system appearing solvent. Your 401k statement is essentially a lie. It is showing you the mark-to-fantasy value of your assets, not the liquidation value. If everyone tried to cash out their 401ks tomorrow, the market would collapse instantly because the actual liquidity isn't there. The 32 trillion is a theoretical number, a mirage that exists only as long as nobody tries to touch it. The solution demands a radical departure from the set it and forget it mindset. You cannot afford to be a passive victim in a financial war. The first step is to recognize that the 401k vehicle itself has major structural flaws in this specific economic environment. The penalties for early withdrawal are steep, yes, but ask yourself, is a 10% penalty worse than a 50% market crash or a total currency collapse? For many, taking control of the capital, even with a penalty, is the only way to access the lifeboats. If you can't withdraw, you must reallocate within the constraints of your plan. Most plans offer a brokerage window or self-directed option that allows you to buy assets outside the standard menu of generic mutual funds. You need to find this option and use it. You must rotate out of long-duration government bonds and generic tech-heavy growth stocks that are trading at valuations detached from reality. You need to move into the tangible world. We are entering an era of scarcity. The assets that will protect you are the ones that cannot be printed. Energy is the master resource. Oil, natural gas, uranium. These are the inputs of civilization. No matter what the currency does, people need to heat their homes and power the grid. Allocating to energy producers, specifically those with low debt and high dividends, is a defensive move. You are buying the toll booth on the economy. Precious metals, gold and silver, are non-negotiable insurance. They are the only assets in the financial system that are not simultaneously someone else's liability. When the bond market breaks, gold is the only collateral that remains pristine. But do not just buy a paper ETF that tracks the price of gold. Understand the difference between allocated and unallocated gold. In a true crisis, paper gold is just another broken promise. If you can, take physical possession. If you are locked in a 401k, look for the closest proxy, mining stocks or trusts that hold physical metal in audited vaults. You are essentially shorting the fiat currency and going long on monetary history. Defense and industrial stocks are another grim but necessary sector. The world is rearming. The peace dividend is over. Governments will spend on defense even if they have to print every last dollar to do it. Companies that manufacture the hardware of security have a guaranteed customer with a printing press. It is a hedge against geopolitical instability. Additionally, look at agricultural land or REITs that own farmland. They aren't making any more land. As the population grows and supply chains fracture, the value of productive soil goes up. This is about owning the base layer of the economy: food, energy, defense, metals, rather than the financialized layer of apps and services. The hidden rule that seals your fate is buried in the fine print of the custodial agreements and the bankruptcy laws. It is the concept of street name registration. When you buy a stock in your 401k or brokerage account, you do not actually own that stock. Seed & Commerce owns the stock. Your broker owns a claim against Seed & Commerce, and you own a claim against your broker. You are a creditor, not an owner. In the event of a systemic collapse or a major brokerage failure, you are an unsecured creditor. The Securities Investor Protection Corporation, SIPC, has nowhere near enough money to cover a systemic failure. The loophole the elites use is direct registration, DRS, or holding assets in legal structures where they have clear, unencumbered title. They don't rely on a chain of 3 different intermediaries to prove they own their wealth. Furthermore, there is the threat of HEIST emergency mandates. The government has the legal framework, established during previous crises, to mandate that retirement funds purchase patriotic bonds or other government instruments in a national emergency. They can legally lock you into the burning building. The moment they announce capital controls or market holidays, it is too late. The $32 trillion heist is already in motion. The funds have been allocated, the trap has been set. Do not let this paralyze you. The realization that the system is rigged is the most liberating moment of your financial life, because it frees you from the obligation to play by their rules. You can step off the game board. You can take possession of your assets. You can position yourself in the things that have real value. The 401k was an experiment, and for the generation retiring now, it is failing. Don't be the last one to realize that the rules have changed. The heist is happening in plain sight, but the getaway car hasn't left yet. You still have time to redirect your future, but you must act with the urgency of someone who smells smoke. In the next video, I am going to expose the specific energy supercycle that is about to create a new class of millionaires while the rest of the market burns.